Charged with the murder of Faith Hedgepeth, a UNC Chapel Hill student found beaten to death in her apartment back in 2012.
Folks, there hadn't been a big update in this case since 2016 when investigators released a composite sketch of a possible suspect.
In 2012, Faith Hedgepeth, who was 19 years old, was found dead in her Chapel Hill flat. As soon as police started their investigation, they ran into a wall of confusion and dead ends. False leads, strange 911 calls, and conflicting statements from people close to her threw them off track.
You're doing all right. You're doing all right. You just stay on the phone with me.
Police.
I just don't want you to be alone right now.
Okay.
Okay? You just stay on the phone with me.
Leads that looked like they might lead to something useful often didn't. This left investigators with more questions than solutions. Time went on, and important pieces of proof stopped making sense. The case became less interesting. No matter how hard people tried, they could not figure out who killed Faith. What kind of person killed her so badly, and why did the case take so long? Let's look into this case. Rosario and her friend, Marisol Rangel, went back to their apartment on September 6, 2012, just before 11 a.m. They had no idea what a terrible turn of events their day would take. They called out for Faith as they walked in, but the flat was strangely quiet. They were scared as they walked toward Faith's room because they didn't know what to expect. They were shocked when they saw Faith's dead body lying on the floor, covered in blood and partly by a blanket.
Faith was brutally murdered here in an apartment she shared with a friend by a killer who is still on the loose. And after 3 years, this case is still shrouded in mystery, leaving lots of questions and plenty of theories.
Rosario called 911 in shock, and as she told the operator what she had found, her voice was shaking.
They fled all over the pillows. I don't know what happened.
Is she breathing?
I don't think so.
Faith was once full of life, and now she was gone. Her friends were left with a powerful question. Who did this, and why? We need to look back at Faith's last hours to understand what led to this point. Faith went to a rush event for the Native American sorority Alpha Pi Omega at the University of North Carolina on the evening of September 5, 2012. She left at 7:15 p.m. and met Rosario around 5:45 p.m. They studied at the library together until about 9 p.m. Around this time, Faith also texted her dad to tell him about her plans for the future. Later, around 11:30 p.m., they went back to their room and then went out again to the Thrill, getting there around 12:40 a.m. They talked and danced for about an hour and a half. Cameras in the building caught them leaving. Rosario wasn't feeling well, so they went back to the apartment and got there. Someone also got into Faith's Facebook account at the same time. At 3:40 a.m., Faith's phone sent a text message to Rosario's ex-boyfriend, Brandon Edwards. "Hey B, could you please come over here? Rosario really needs you more. You know, tell her you care." The same phone sent another message with the word then, 3 minutes later. It was thought to be a fix for a typo in the first message. These texts were the last thing that was seen on Hedgepeth's phone. After that, Rosario tried to get in touch with Edwards and then a college soccer player named Jordan McCrary, but neither of them answered. Rosario left the apartment at 4:25 a.m. because she thought Faith was asleep. She stayed at a friend's house until morning. At 10:30 a.m., Rosario tried to call Faith again, but didn't hear back. Because she was scared, she called Marisol. The two of them went to the apartment together and found Faith's body. Who was in charge? Could it be Rosario, Rangel, or someone else? The real reason Faith died is still a mystery, but as the study goes on, more information will come to light. In 1992, Faith Hedgepeth was born in Warren County, North Carolina. She was happy to be a member of the Haliwa-Saponi Native American tribe. After her parents split up, she was raised by her mother, Connie. Faith grew up in a home that had a lot of problems. Connie already had 3 kids, so she named her Faith because she thought it would give her the strength and hope to raise a 4th child in tough situations.
She was a very lively person, just friendly to everyone. I just want to give to people, give back to her community. She loved people.
Even with all of these problems, Faith was a great student. She did very well in high school. She was an honor student, a cheerleader, and an active part of many clubs. Because she worked hard, she was able to get a Gates Millennium Scholarship and go to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, UNC. Faith wanted to finish college and become the first person in her family to do so. She wanted to work as a doctor or a teacher. Her first 2 years at UNC were good, but she didn't go to school in the spring of 2012. Through the summer of that year, she shared an apartment in Chapel Hill with her friend Karina Rosario and Rosario's boyfriend, Eric Tacoy Jones. Karina and Eric, on the other hand, were rude to each other. After Eric tried to break into their apartment twice, Faith helped Karina get an order against him to protect her. Faith was scared that Eric would kill her if he couldn't get back together with Karina, which made Eric very angry. Faith's life took a bad turn, and even though she was still hopeful about the future, she was getting more and more into a dangerous position. The death of Faith was a terrible blow to her family. Faith's death was hard for her mother to understand because she had already been through a lot raising her kids by herself. Faith's brothers were also very sad because they had lost a sister who was a role model and a source of support.
It's been very hard learning of how Faith died. She was beaten. She was bludgeoned to death. A lot of people don't understand what that means, but it was really bad.
She was a kind, smart young woman with a bright future, and her family was having a hard time dealing with her death. Not only did Faith's death hurt me terribly, but it hurt everyone in the community who had watched her grow and supported her dreams. She died in a violent accident, leaving her family with a deep sense of loss and confusion about why someone so full of promise had been taken from them. The investigation into Faith's death began in secret, which made people look twice right away. In Chapel Hill, unlike most police departments, they went to great lengths to keep information from the public. All records were sealed by a court order, and even repeated calls for information from the media were turned down. While people in the community waited for answers, the cops worked quietly behind closed doors to collect evidence from the scene without telling anyone what they had found. DNA from the crime scene was the first important hint. It was taken out and matched male DNA found in other parts of the apartment. But things got even stranger when the autopsy showed that Faith had died from a blow to the head, most likely from a rum bottle.
It was a Bacardi bottle, and it was covered in blood, or blood smudges. It was a brutal.
A man named Eric Tacoy Jones, who used to date Karina Rosario, caught the attention of the cops right away. He was a strong suspect because he had a past of domestic violence and had made threats against Faith before. An acquaintance of Jones's texted, "Forgive me for what I am about to do," the night before the murder. Jones later shared the same message on his Twitter account. His Facebook banner had a disturbing message that said, "Dear Lord, forgive me for all my sins and the sins I may commit today." This was 3 days after Faith's death. It was a scary build-up to what looked like an admission of guilt. Even with these red flags, the cops were not able to directly link Jones to the crime. They got a DNA sample from him, but couldn't match it to any of the evidence they found at the scene.
I knew from the beginning that my DNA didn't match the DNA that they had. And they continued to let it go on for 9 years with me being dragged through the mud.
More DNA tests on other guys, even ones who had been to the nearby club, where Faith and Karina had been, also came up with no matches. Jones was legally taken off the list of suspects, and the investigation seemed to stop. When the death of Faith was being looked into, it looked like the puzzle parts would quickly fit together. But as time went on, detectives found more clues that made the mystery even bigger. The release of some expected and some unexpected information hinted at a level of complexity that was hard to imagine. There was a lot of attention paid to the 911 call, which was a key piece of evidence in the case. Karina Rosario called because she found her friend's body in their apartment. In the call, she never called Faith by name. Instead, she called her friend, which many people found strange. Reporter Tom Gasparoli questioned whether or not the call was real and said it might not have been Rosario, but Marisol Rangel instead, whose voice sounded close. Gasparoli also said that Rosario seemed hesitant the whole time, even when the dispatcher told her over and over to check on Faith's breathing. Was the person who found the body really as good as they seemed? Was the call to 911 itself a clue? People who were watching the case started to think about these kinds of questions. It wasn't just the 911 call that was strange, though. A mysterious note, written on a torn piece of paper that was found near the crime scene, made things even more confusing. A ballpoint pen was used to write the message, which said, "I'm not stupid jealous." Its sloppy and angry writing looked like it was written in a fit of rage, but it wasn't clear what it meant. Why would you leave a note at the scene of a crime? The torn piece of paper looked like it came from a food bag from Time Out, the restaurant that Faith and Karina had been to that night. But was the note a personal note to Faith, or just a wild outburst? Experts in forensics looked at the note and noticed that the handwriting was not constant. One person underlined the word stupid, which was written much more clearly, possibly by someone trying to hide who they were or trick police. Even scarier was the fact that the note didn't look dirty with blood, even though there was blood all over the room. This made it look like it might have been written before the murder. Why do you want to leave it? Was it a hint or a clever way to lead you astray?
Looking at it, I would get the impression it was either written outside of the crime scene or it was written before, like a premeditation.
Tom Gasparoli, a reporter, thought that the note might not have been meant for Faith at all. The killer might have put it there to throw off detectives. But was it a trick or a last, desperate message? The tone of the note made me think of deep anger or jealousy. Was the person who killed Faith mad at her or at someone else? Something else very scary that was found in Faith's case was on her own phone. Faith's phone called a friend by accident the night before she was killed, and a short but disturbing chat was recorded. At first, it seemed like a pocket dial mistake because of the noise and sounds that were hard to understand. But when audio expert Arlo West looked at the call, he found disturbing bits. First, a woman's voice said, "I think she's dying." And then a man's voice told her to do it anyway. West also said that he heard Faith pleading for help and talking about Eric and Rosie. This made West think that the conversation had something to do with Faith's friend Karina Rosario and her violent past with Eric Tacoy Jones. The call was made at 1:23 a.m., which is close to the time that Faith was said to be at the club. At first, the cops didn't believe it and thought the call was just background noise from a night out. But Wes noticed some oddities, like the lack of normal nightclub sounds, which made the scene seem off. The call may have been taken earlier, or it may have caught the last moments before Faith was killed. The fact that these questions were still unsolved made an already sad case even worse. As the detectives looked through this strange evidence, they came up with more questions than solutions. Even though these pieces of evidence were not proof, they did suggest that the killer may have left more than just physical clues at the scene. They may have also left a trail of psychological clues that could tell investigators a lot about the killer's mind, but only if they could figure out what they meant. The people became more and more angry as the case went on. The university, the Halawa-Saoni tribe, the local Crime Stoppers chapter, and the apartment building where Faith lived all put up $29,000 as a reward for information that led to an arrest. People thought that the prize would lead to a tip that would break the case wide open, but weeks and months went by with no progress. Even after Governor Bev Perdue added another $10,000 to the prize, there was still no answer. During this time, the study was kept secret. The Daily Tar Heel, UNC student newspaper, asked for the sealed data to be made public in November 2012. The court turned down their request, and no one spoke about the case again. Even Faith's family didn't know a lot of the facts, but they did say in public that their daughter's death certificate showed she had been beaten. The town of Chapel Hill stayed tense as the month went on. The FBI had made a profile of the man DNA found at the scene by January 2013. The police thought that this person lived close to Faith and had been interested in her. They also thought that his behavior had probably changed after the crime. Even though this was a big step forward, the court told the records to stay secret. Everyone knew that the case was still going on behind closed doors, but they didn't know what was going on. The cops did not officially ask for help from the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation until September 2013, a full year after Faith's death. The case had gone cold, and Chris Blue, the police head of Chapel Hill, said they had used up all of their resources. Still, the case files stayed secret, and no one knew how Faith's murder happened. After 2 months, the study went in a different, more troubling direction. The investigation's honesty was called into question by news organizations like the Tar Heel. Why didn't the cops follow up on important leads? Faith's apartment complex neighbors said they had doubts about Eric Jones for a long time before the murder, but the police had never fully searched the area. In fact, only Faith's apartment had been fully searched. Other apartments in the complex, as well as the woods behind the building, had been missed. It was found that the police had never looked at the security footage from the parking lot of The Thrill, the nightclub where Faith and Karina were the night before the murder. This was a huge missed chance. The owner of the tow company that was in charge of the parking lot set up security cameras that could have caught important footage, but the police didn't ask to see it until 2014, almost 19 months after the crime. The court finally ordered the information to be made public after a lot of public pressure. After that, there was a lot of news coverage as investigators released important papers like search warrants and investigative notes. These papers showed what the cops did or didn't do in the case. They also showed the first look at the order of events that led to Faith's death. The autopsy report was finally made public in September 2014, which was almost 2 years after the murder. It proved what a lot of people already thought. Faith had been badly beaten. There was blood under her toenails, showing that she had fought back after getting hit in the head. At first, the DNA taken from the crime scene was thought to help find the killer, but it was still a puzzle. Even though the investigation went on, it was still not clear who killed Faith Hedgepeth or why. As the case went on, more and more questions were raised. Had the police messed up the probe at the start? Who was the man whose DNA was found at the scene of the crime? And why did he kill Faith? These questions would stay around for a long time. The mystery of Faith Hedgepeth's death went unsolved for years, with many ideas but no clear answers. People made guesses about who killed Faith and why. One thing was for sure, though. The killer was probably someone who knew her. Police in Chapel Hill thought the murder wasn't random and was likely done by someone in her UNC Chapel Hill group. Over the years, detectives talked to more than 2,000 people, got DNA from 750 of them, and came down to 10 suspects. Even though a lot of time had passed, Chief Chris Blue stressed in 2016 that the case was still very much living. The cops were still looking into this core group because they were determined to find the truth. But there were still questions. Who was the killer? What made them do something so horrible? But as the investigation went on and new details came to light, the case took another turn that no one saw coming. A shocking news came from the Chapel Hill Police on September 23, 2016, almost 4 years after Faith's death. A genetic testing company called Parabon Nanolabs had worked with them to create a system that could make physical pictures of suspects based on their DNA. The public was shown this picture, which was made from the DNA profile found at the crime scene. It gave them a rare look at the unknown suspect. The picture wasn't a perfect headshot, but it was based on phenotyping, which is the study of genetics to guess a person's physical traits. What Parabon did, called Snapshot, used DNA to guess everything about a person, from their skin tone and scars to their face shape and eye color. The head of the company said that their system couldn't tell what someone's height or weight would be, but it could give a lot of information about how that person might look. DNA testing produced a picture of a guy with a mix of ancestry, mostly Native American and European, with some Latino roots. He most likely had dark skin, black hair, and few to no freckles. His ancestors came from Mexico, Colombia, and Spain, and there were also small amounts of South American and African blood. The guess was made with more than 80% trust and was surprisingly close to the truth. This picture gave police their first clear look at a possible suspect, but it also brought up more questions. Who was this person? How did their DNA get to the crime scene? How come the cops couldn't figure out who they were? However, in 2017, journalist Tom Gasparoli claimed that the killer might not have been one of Faith's close friends, but rather someone who wasn't very close to her, but was angry or resentful toward her. When police began to look into Faith's roommate, Karina Rosario, this idea got more attention. Rosario made people suspicious when she called 911 and only called Faith her friend, never by name. The texts Faith sent to her ex-boyfriend that night made it sound like Rosario needed him right away. Rosario said she left the flat while Faith was sleeping, but there were still questions about her story. Rosario kept in touch with detectives even after she moved away and chose to stay quiet. He made it sound like she might know more than she was letting on and have the key to solving the case. People have been wondering for a long time, will the truth ever come out? Not until 2021 did there be a big step forward in the case. After almost 10 years of mystery, there was finally a breakthrough in September 2021. It seemed like the case was finally over, but it also brought up more questions. Miguel Sco Olivares, 28, was caught in Chapel Hill. He is from Durham, North Carolina, and had not been a suspect before. What went wrong, and why was he arrested? DNA was the answer. In August 2021, Salguero Olivares was caught on a different charge, driving while drunk. But the DNA that was taken from him when he was arrested would soon link him to the murder of Faith Hedgepeth. According to court records from January 2022, Salguero Olivares' DNA was found at the crime scene, and a palm print was found on the murder weapon. The discovery changed the course of the case, but the police were still hesitant to say anything in public. Chief Blue told the press that even though Salguero Olivares had been caught, the whole story would have to wait. There was now the question of how Salguero Olivares, who had not been involved in the case before, got involved. What did he have to do with Faith? Even though the arrest didn't mean everything, it did make the case more complicated. Was Salguero Olivares a friend of Faith's, or did Faith only know about him through other people? Even scarier was the thought of what had made him do such a terrible thing. It is now 2024, and Salguero Olivares is waiting for his hearing. Not much is known about him at this time. As the police looked into Salguero Olivares' part, old and new ideas about how Faith died came together. Was he just a chance stranger, or did he have something to do with her? What did that mean for other suspects, like Rosario, if he was to blame? Roland Hedgepeth, Faith's father, said he was thankful and thanked God for being there to see it. At the same time, Faith's mother, Connie Hedgepeth, told everyone that the truth about her daughter's death would come out in the end.
The news this morning, I didn't do anything but cry and thank God and praise God, because I put it in His hands and it was His timing. I don't know why it took so long, but I just know that it was Him.
The arrest of Salguero Olivares made things clearer, but also led to more questions. Even though the case had been looked into for years, no one knew the whole story. It was now the 10th year of the case. The arrest didn't end the case. It just added another layer. People are now wondering if this is the last piece in a long puzzle that hasn't been solved. And that's a wrap for today's case. If you want more true crime stories, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think happened. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and keep seeking the truth.